Well, thank you for joining us for our MASSP Leader to Leader Round 2. My name is Colin Rittmaster. I'm the Associate Executive Director at MASSP, and we're looking forward to connecting with you today. We have a jam-packed Leader to Leader session. In addition to me being on the line, Bob Kefjan is going to be coming up next. Wendy Zadeb is with us, as well as Steve Seward, Ryan Casey, and Matt Alley, who are going to be doing some breakout sessions. And we have a special guest, Donna Tinberg from Luskin Elverson, who's going to be giving us some specific special education guidance and special ed and students with 504s as far as FAPE and accessibility. But before we get started, please do know we are connecting through social media, so feel free to reach out to us either through MASSP or any of our individual pieces to share your learning either now or during thereafter. Making sure to hit Schools Get It Done as our hashtag to remind our legislature and community of all the things that educators are doing in support of student learning. As we go, please do remain muted until we're ready to call on you, and use the chat function to raise questions, particularly during the general session, because we'll have over 100 people joining us today, and we'll be getting some resources together and sharing those out to you in the next day or so. So thank you for joining us, and on behalf of MASSP, we appreciate all that you are doing while you stay home with your families, but yet continue to do the work that's so necessary for learning continuity. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Kefjan, and he will be providing you a brief update.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, my apologies. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time today because you guys are pretty well aware of most of the things that are going on, but it's good to have a common foundation, so just wanted to start with that. Everybody is staying home and staying safe now. Especially since Monday when the governor issued her most recent, or not her most recent, but probably the most sweeping executive order to this point. At least for schools, though, the order didn't contain anything in particular related to schools. It didn't extend the closure or anything else that had already been done. So not a whole lot new there in terms of schools, but certainly enough personally to take up everybody's attention. Could you skip ahead, Colin? So the big news out of Washington right now is the federal stimulus package. It is a $2 trillion stimulus package. It's huge. Just wanted to highlight briefly that there's a piece in there specifically for education. It is a $30 billion spend. Now that's nationwide, so it's not like $30 billion is coming to the state of Michigan. It's broken into 3 buckets. The governors of each state are going to share a $3 billion emergency education relief fund. K-12 education is getting $13.5 billion, and higher ed's getting a little bit more than that. The one thing I'd highlight is despite pushing on money for connectivity and devices, there's nothing in there about that. The big question everybody has is seat time. And that's obvious given the way we've got these 2 competing visions for seat time coming out within the last week, one from the department, one from the governor. I expect that sometime soon we're going to have some real clarity on what's going to happen with seat time, but we're just simply not there yet. Thank you to everyone. Go ahead, Colin. Who took part in MASSP's alert last week on Tuesday. We had 571 people send 536 emails and 130 tweets in just a little over about 6 hours. So we really slammed the legislature hard, hit 120 out of 138 legislators. That sent a really loud message to Lansing, which is why I think that we're going to have some resolution on not just seat time, but some of these other unresolved issues. Although I do suspect that one of the big things that's going to be coming out soon as a result of these unresolved issues is also something on distance learning. And as you guys are wrestling with distance learning, and please be clear that I'm not speaking just about virtual learning. We're talking about any sort of learning outside the building, because with technology being what it is right now and the variation and huge gap that some students have, we've got to put all options on the table with this. But with that, you guys are going to be dealing with the issue of special ed and accommodations, which is where our next speaker will hopefully provide us with some guidance.
Hi, everybody. This is Donna Tinberg. I am a recovering special ed administrator. I work now with Lusk Albertson, but I did 25 years in the Novi Community School District. Full disclosure, I am not an attorney. I'm the team lead on our Lusk Albertson Special Education Services Unit, which is a resource for districts who need help but maybe don't quite need their attorney to help them out with that. I noticed as I was looking through the participant list that a number of you are special ed folks. We did do a webinar yesterday specifically targeted towards special ed leaders. And if you're interested in more detail, you might want to look at our website and pull down that PowerPoint from yesterday. For those of you who are secondary folks, I want to recognize that special ed administrators tend to be good rule followers. That's important because our field is pretty highly regulated, but I understand that we probably make you crazy in a time like this with our emphasis on rules and regulations. And to quote Billy Joel, you may be right, I may be crazy, but sometimes it may be a lunatic that you're looking for. So today I'm going to hope to find some balance between that emphasis on regulations that we tend to make in special ed and what you need to do in the front lines every day. We're going to talk a little bit about compliance issues, that continuum of virtual learning experiences, some special ed delivery considerations, and that ultimate threat that's looming out there, which is compensatory education. Put your questions to chat as we go along. Ryan, Steve will be monitoring that and may interrupt me if needed, but perhaps we'll hold many other questions till the end, depending on the time frame that we have here. So we've received a lot of guidance yesterday, in the last couple weeks here about service delivery and special education. I'm not going to go through that in painful detail. I'm assuming that you've seen much of that or you've heard about it from your special ed administrator. These have focused real strongly on compliance. We're getting some consistent messages out of those compliance information, the compliance information we've been getting. First of all, that you've heard that districts have to ensure that students with disabilities have equal access to the learning opportunities that are provided to all kids. And to the extent that all students are being provided with continuous learning opportunities, students with disabilities have to be provided with what we call FAPE, a free appropriate public education, as described in their IEPs and 504 plans. You've probably also heard that if the district provides no services to the general population, no services are required for students with disabilities. That was not intended as a discouragement to providing services for all kids. We're going to talk about that a little bit here as we go forward. And then the fourth piece of clear guidance that we're getting is that compensatory education will need to be considered on a case-by-case basis once normal school operations can resume. And that comp ed requirement probably was well intended, but I will tell you it has triggered a giant defensive mode on the part of special ed folks, and perhaps on your part as well. That's a nerve-wracking kind of a thing to think about at the end of all this, that we've done what we can, and now we have to look at compensatory education. So we're going to talk about that as we go through today as well. Perry Zerkel, you may recognize as a nationally recognized attorney. He did a lot of writing for the Kaplan magazine. You might remember his column there. And Perry's kind of advising us that we put the brakes on this panic to comply with the guidance that we've been receiving lately. First, he reminds us that this guidance, whether it's from the U.S. Department of Ed, Office of Civil Rights, our state guidance that's just come out, all of those are just interpretations by agencies that are responsible for administering these laws. None of these documents has the force of law. And whether courts find them persuasive, it depends. It will depend on the situation. So it really, the guidance should provide a curb on the side of the road that keeps us from going too far off track, keeps us a little bit on the right path. It can be used as a mirror to reflect back on what we've done, but we don't have to be absolutely obsessed with following every piece of guidance to the letter. And we're going to talk about how to find that balance. Some emerging emphasis more recently, we're ready to move on to the next slide, is that we're starting to see a shift in tone with the March 21st memo that came out from the federal office, the supplemental fact sheet that came out. Secretary DeVos made it very clear in that message that special ed requirements should not get in the way of providing services to all students. I think it was probably a shock to the federal folks that, whoa, people took us fairly literally when we said, if you don't provide service to general ed, you don't have to provide service to special ed. And since the special ed services were so daunting, some districts actually did decide, whoa, we're not doing anything. This is just too much to handle. That was not the intention. U.S. Department of Ed has come out, and Secretary DeVos has said it in a number of her communications since then, that they realize that not everything can be done in the usual way because these are very unusual circumstances that we're in. They've indicated virtual learning, virtual meetings are permitted. We should not be worrying about that. And so they're trying to do a little bit of calming here with this March 21st supplemental fact sheet. Even our own Michigan Department of Ed Office of Special Education, which tends to be pretty rigorous on compliance, has indicated that they will not be issuing any corrective actions for past due timelines on meetings or evaluations. In other words, we may submit some data for special ed in this next data submission period that's pretty error-filled. And they recognize that's going to happen, and we'll get a ding because our data has errors, but there will be no corrections required. And that is a huge relief for special ed folks around the state. So the emphasis that we're getting really right now is what's reasonable and individually appropriate in light of the current circumstances. We need to be making decisions in the context of protecting the health and safety of both students and staff, but that context is going to change over time. We're going to have to make different decisions over time because, as you've seen already, this is a rapidly changing situation. So reasonable, individually appropriate in light of the circumstances are key phrases that we want to remember. A key component of this whole approach is going to be communication with our parents of kids with disabilities. Collaborating with them is going to be critical. Allies rarely wage war on each other. And if we make parents our allies during this period of time, we're going to have far less likelihood that we're going to have state complaints and due process hearings on the other side of this crisis. I really encourage you, communicate with parents. Decisions need to be made not unilaterally, but in coordination with IEP teams, with parents, and then we document those considerations. We document our parent contacts. We document the conversations we had. What did we decide in those conversations? Why did we decide that? We get that down in writing. What services are we going to provide to students? Have we provided to students? The date, the duration, the type, what kind of progress the student made during that activity. Those are the kinds of notes that your special ed teachers should be keeping right now. Any decision making, the data that was considered, the rationale, the results of that decision making, all that documentation is going to help us on the far end of things. We know it's not going to be perfect right now, and that's okay. We just want to keep records of why we did what we did when we did it. Which drives us really to what leadership needs to be about in this unprecedented time of crisis. And on our next slide, we're going to talk about this. It's this notion that compassion needs to be considered over compliance. Compliance mindset really asks, what do we have to do? How much is going to be enough? What will be the consequences if we don't do it right? Those are conversations that we have with the people above us who are giving directives. They're really conversations that have very little to do with our consumers, with our kids, and with our parents. But if we move into a compassion mindset, which I think maybe where many building level people have been for a long time, a compassion mindset asks our families, how are you feeling? What do you need right now? And how can we help you in those difficult circumstances? That's a communication between us and families. It's not about regulations. It's not with those people up in Lansing. It's not with the people in DC. It's a communication between us and our families. And it's that compassion mindset that I would urge every leader, special ed or otherwise, to be having during this time period. Because actually, if you really think about it, compassion will compel us to higher quality service because it's driven by our own conscience rather than by directives from an outside source. It relies on our own personal commitment to excellence on behalf of all kids. It's not rule driven. It's driven by what's right, not about doing things right. So let's move forward. One more slide here. Perry Zerkel probably put it best. He said, rather than emotion-laden legalism, the key factors during this highly unusual crisis start with health and safety and with the consideration of what's essential and what's practicable at this time. Those are the decisions that you need to be making at a building level about delivering services to your kids with disabilities. So let's talk about some considerations for special ed services. Clearly, we need to be thinking about capacity. What's our capacity as a district as a whole to provide instructional services to all students during the closure? Some districts are really capable on this front. For some, it's way new territory. And wherever you are, that's okay. You just have to be able to accurately assess what your capacity is right now as a whole. We have to think about our capacity of families to access instruction while they're at home. What's the educational background of folks there? What's the comfort with technology of folks there? What's the adult supervision like in our homes? If the high school kids are getting a ton of homework to do that's going to need mom and dad to intervene, and the middle school students getting the same thing, and the elementary students doing the same thing, how do we balance 3 full-time students in one house with maybe sometimes one parent, or maybe even only the middle school student being in charge of all that instruction? We really need to think about what that capacity is at home. Thinking about health considerations that are going on right now. Some folks have had illness in the family that way precedes COVID-19. Some are struggling with COVID-19 cases within the family or within the immediate household. So we really have to think about what instruction is reasonable for our families at this time. And then also thinking about the capacity of our special ed staff to develop and deliver high quality instruction to all kids in a manner other than face-to-face. I would say by and large, this isn't the strongest point of our special educators. They're face-to-face, touchy-feely, one-on-one kind of folks, and probably not your strongest tech people. Maybe I'm misreading that, and maybe grossly overgeneralizing, but you do need to think about what's their capacity to do this on the turn of a dime here. So when we think about that, I really tried very hard to create some kind of matrix that was going to help client districts. I thought, I know what it looks like when there are no services to any kids. Then I know what you're supposed to do for special ed kids. You don't have to do anything. If we're providing a full, true educational experience for all kids, then I know that we have to provide a free, appropriate public education for kids with disabilities. But I struggled with what's in the middle there. I had originally thought I could do the 3 types of instruction across the top. I can do the questions down the side, and I'm going to get you there, and I'm going to give you easy answers. You go across column A and down this left-hand column, we'll cross in the middle, and you'll be able to find the right answer. And I quickly came to the conclusion there isn't a right answer on how to deliver special ed services right now. But I participated in a webinar with CASE last week. CASE is the Council of Administrators of Special Ed at the national level, and they introduced this notion of a continuum. And I think it's very important that we assess as general ed folks where we are on this continuum of distance learning experiences, alternative learning experiences when we aren't face-to-face with kids. Some of you may be at the point where you're just providing enrichment resources, homework packets that reinforce already acquired skills. Maybe there's no expectation that kids will even complete these assignments. It's just something that keeps them in touch with learning. And if that's where you are, that is absolutely okay. That's where you are today. You're there. Depending on the length of this closure, you might go further, but that's where we are today, and that's okay. Some other districts might be further along the continuum. You're ready to provide some continuous learning opportunities where kids might practice existing skills and also start acquiring some new skills. You'll have providers frequently checking in with students and parents. There's probably going to be some expectation that kids complete this work. That's a little further along the continuum. And if that's where you are right now, that's absolutely okay too. Some districts are really capable of providing true distance learning, regular school, short of brick and mortar, structured activities that are teacher directed, there's strong instructional practice going on, students are implementing this work, turning it back into the teacher is assessing it for progress, or giving grades, credits, all that sort of thing. If that's where you are, that's great too. You just have to figure out where you are in that continuum. And it is not a neat, clean, boxy kind of continuum. They aren't boxes with hard edges. They flow into each other. You might have 1 foot in one box and 1 foot in another box. It may fluctuate by building, by grade, by subject area, by teacher. But it's important to gauge where you are on this continuum, because if we continue with this closure, we hopefully would move up the continuum over time as we improve our skills. But this continuum also dictates what it is you want to be doing for students with disabilities. Let's talk about that a little bit. I do love this quote from Michelle Reed out of Seattle, and she recognizes that online learning is not ideal, so let's extend some grace to school districts as we work through this. We're working really hard to provide sound educational experiences for all of our kids. We can't allow perfection to be the enemy of any kind of progress. The fact that you're not ready to do true distance learning is okay right now. Give yourself some forgiveness on that. You don't have to be perfect at it. we're going to see how we can kind of leverage what we're doing in general ed and what does that mean for special ed. Everybody doesn't have to be in the top part of the continuum immediately. As Teddy Roosevelt said, do what you can with what you have where you are. We're going to continue to grow, to reassess as conditions change. It'll depend on the length of the closure, what other orders we get from the governor, what's the health of our staff and community. You're from all over the state of Michigan right now. And I know that people over in certain areas of the state are not experiencing what we're experiencing down here in the southeast corner of the state. It's really different here. If you don't have any cases yet, it'll be amazing what happens when it hits your area. And the feeling that runs through your community. So we have to recognize that we're all at different places. As I said, what you're going to do for students with disabilities hinges on what you're doing for all kids. So let's assume that you're one of those districts. Did we skip a slide here? Or did we there we are. Okay. Let's look at where you are. Assuming that you are at the point of just providing enrichment resources, homework packets, you've maybe provided a list of online things that kids could do, maybe sent home a little bit, but it's just kind of practice activities. If that's what you're doing, what you need to do is make reasonable efforts to provide appropriate access for students with disabilities to the extent possible given the current circumstances. You're going to think about, did I provide clear instructions that either the student or their parents can easily follow? Have I made some attempt to accommodate some different reading levels, math levels, writing abilities, made some attempt to adjust for that? Have I maybe shortened the assignments to account for kids with attention issues? Haven't helped the parents who are at home dealing with all those guys. And then considering focusing your work for specific classes versus an approach where everyone in the grade gets the same work. Does your resource program deliver different home-based activities than does your general ed population? Does your CI classroom deliver something that's different than your resource classroom? Maybe start thinking about how can we differentiate that based on the skills that our students have. If you're at the next step of the continuum, where we're actually offering some continuous learning opportunities, we're starting to expect that all students will begin to acquire some new skills, and our teachers are going to be interacting, providing some kind of minimal instruction, some kind of at least contact, communication. And at that point, you're going to be heightening your efforts to provide meaningful, equal access for students with disabilities to the extent possible. If you have some expectations that all students are going to be benefiting and engaging in new learning, then you should have a similar expectation for your kids with IEPs and 504 plans. They should also be expected to engage in new learning, be acquiring new skills. You might be starting to look at accommodations and modifications of those gen ed materials that are going home in accordance with the student's IEP or 504 plan. There's supplementary aids and services that are in their IEP. What could we be doing in terms of implementing those relative to the distance learning that we're doing? Considering those different input and output modalities, do our kids need a recorded version of something rather than a print version? Could they dictate their answers and have mom write it down and send it back, or do we need to have them do all the writing and typing themselves? Just to really start thinking about what is it that's unique about this child that would make this opportunity more meaningful for him or her. You might want to be thinking about some virtual behavioral consultation to parents to support work completion in the home. A lot of our kids are not easy characters. You know that. You know who your frequent flyers are. And left to the devices of mom and dad, they may have words for mom and dad that we don't hear from them so much at school because they know they can't get away with it. So mom and dad may need some strategies on how to support that work completion there at home. We're going to start focusing more and more on work for specific classes, for groups of students within a class. And we'd also want to, at this point, be really looking carefully at our related services, social work, speech, OT, PT. How can we start incorporating those into this continuous learning expectation that we're having for all kids? And then as we get better and better at this whole distance learning thing, at some point, we're going to get to the point of this really rigorous, valuable distance learning that's everything short of brick and mortar for all kids. And at that point, we're really emphasizing then full-fledged equal access for students with disabilities. We're moving toward that full delivery of a free, appropriate public education. It's teacher-directed, student-implemented, and assessed for progress. Progress monitoring will be important at this point. We have tailored work that addresses not just progress in the general curriculum, but also progress toward those IEP goals and objectives. That includes related services as well. delivering all those special ed programs, related services in a reasonable and individually appropriate manner given the circumstances around this child, the circumstances around the family, the circumstances around our school capacity, the circumstances around our community health as a whole. Moving forward, I have used the word circumstances a few times, and I've used that because there was a Supreme Court case that goes by Andrew F. It was Andrew F. versus whomever. And Andrew F. recently, in the last few years, set our standard for what it means to deliver a free, appropriate public education. And the Supreme Court said in Andrew F. that in order to meet its substantive obligation under IDEA, a school district must offer an IEP that's reasonably calculated to enable a child to make progress in light of the child's circumstances. We typically think of in light of the child's circumstances as well, in light of their disability, in light of the challenges they have, in light of their certain skill levels, in light of all that, what would be reasonably calculated to help them make progress. But we now have a new layer of circumstances that I don't think the Supreme Court ever could have conceived of. And that's this unique circumstance we have right now with emergency closures of schools across our state. That's a new layer of unique circumstances. And we have to consider what's reasonable in order for this student to make progress in light of the situation where we find ourselves right now. Andrew F. was significant in that it also said, we will give deference to well-reasoned decisions by the IEP teams. As long as there's a cogent explanation for what you're doing, it's okay. The courts will side with the school. They will defer to the school if you have a cogent, well-reasoned decision about why this offer of FAPE, this plan for this student was designed for helping this student make progress in light of their circumstances. So you really need to rely on your IEP team to support that decision-making. This is not your decision alone to decide what services a student will receive during this closure if they have an IEP or a 504 plan. Look at those teams, your IEP teams, your 504 plan. Have them work with parents. Parents as partners, allies don't turn on us. Document your cogent explanations, keep good written records. We cannot document too much in this situation. We all have read research about the impact of emotion on memory, and that applies to us as well as to our families. A lot of people are in fight or flight mode right now, and we're in that mode. We can't remember things well long term. So what we need to do is create a written record in real time to help compensate for those inevitable memory gaps, because those memory gaps will later lead to frustration and anger, and that's where we get state complaints and due process hearings. So by creating a good, solid written record right now, keeping that communication open with parents, we markedly diminish the chance that we will have any problems later. I really happen to believe that by and large, our parents are reasonable folks. If we're partnering with them, they're going to understand that we're doing the best we possibly can given the circumstances. So there's a rule of thumb that I would say for building principles is around comparability. As rigor, accountability, and expectations for progress increase for the general population, our special ed obligation moves toward that full implementation of FAPE as described in the IEP or the 504 plan. So as general ed expectations go up, our special ed services and expectations should go up as well. There's an old phrase about what I did when I knew what I knew. So as we get better at distance learning, we can up our ante, we can beef up our game. That's okay, but it also ups our ante on what we do for students with disabilities. And this will become more and more important the longer the closure persists, because if we're going to have to continue learning, it has to be meaningful for all kids. So let's talk a little bit about that thinly veiled threat that's sitting out there, this notion of compensatory services. If we could move on to the next slide. When we think about compensatory education, it's usually perceived as a punishment. I can tell you that's the way it's viewed from the special ed perspective. It's usually the smack on the hands that we get because we did something wrong and we need to make up for it. We need to lose that notion about compensatory education. I would really remind you that compensatory education in this case is set up as a safety net that we're going to consider after this crisis because we care about our kids. We're going to look back at what did we provide during the closure? How well did it work for this particular student? And is there anything we need to do to help this student get back up to speed? I think that's a conversation we would want anyone to have around our own kids. And that's the conversation we'll need to be having with our families. Once things get back to normal, your IEP teams will be sitting down and looking through and saying, what did we do? Was it good enough? Did we miss something? Is there something we need to do to get them back up to speed? We can prepare for those conversations now if we're doing good documentation. If we want to document our contacts with parents and students, we want to document the services we've been providing, and we want to document student progress before, during, and after the closure. Your special ed teachers should have been taking data on student progress before this all happened. They should have that to rely on to know where the student was functioning as of March 13th. They should be doing some progress monitoring as we get into provision of FAPE and more rigorous learning that we're expecting for kids. They should be keeping some data on how kids are doing with that instruction. And then once that we return to school, our special ed teachers should be looking at how does their performance right now upon return compare with their performance before we left, so that our progress monitoring data can be compared and we can determine, did we miss something? Did they lose skills? Where do we need to make this up? Before we leave comp ed, I'd also like to talk about this notion that this is not only a safety net for our kids, but it's a safety net for us. The Office of Special Ed Programs at the federal level somehow anticipated that we might not deliver perfection during this time of closure. That might have been very wise of them. It just might have been fairly obvious to them. But what they've done is build in this comp ed consideration, which gives us an affirmative chance to make it right once school resumes. It's an opportunity for us proactively to cover our you-know-whats in case our you-know-whats were hanging out there uncovered a little bit during this closure. It's okay if we didn't do everything well. We'll have this comp ed conversation and we'll make it right then. And that then wards off again. It's another preventative measure for those state complaints that we're so fearful of happening later. This is the safety net. Comp ed needs to be embraced, not feared. So the bottom line for building administrators, I would say, is work with that compassion mindset over a compliance mindset. Are we doing what's reasonable and appropriate in light of the circumstances? Are we doing our best to provide meaningful access for all students with disabilities? And as the rigor increases for the general population, are we moving closer to that full, free, appropriate public education for students with disabilities? Question for you is, are you working closely with your special ed administrator to address questions and concerns, particularly as it's related to compliance issues? And I say that's particularly important because in order to make a decision about when and if I'm going to deviate from the requirements, you have to have a good, solid understanding of the requirements. And without any offense to a building administrator, I don't think that's your forte. That's your special ed administrator's forte. Because remember, they're the lunatic that you're glad you have at this point. But together, you two can determine what's reasonable, what's appropriate in light of the current circumstances. It's really about compassion over compliance. And with that, I think we're done. We have our contact information here. This PowerPoint will be loaded into our website. We have our previous PowerPoint on the website. And I think we have a little bit of time, so if we have questions, I would be glad to field those.
Donna, this is Bob Kefchin. Just one question I'm seeing from the chat right now from Jeff Bull, and it looks like a few other folks have the same issue. He says, I'm wondering about the issue of access. These comments seem to assume that there's 100% access at home of internet and necessary computer equipment. What are the implications of absence of access, and how does that impact special ed expectations?
It depends on what you're doing for your gen ed population. So if your expectation is only homes with internet access get to have services during this period, that tells us something, but that tells us we're probably not at the point of FAPE. The State Department has been pretty clear that if we're expecting a student with a disability to complete the work that we're providing via technology, it's our obligation to provide technology access to that student, which may include iPads, personal equipment, may include wireless access, may include phones. So it's our obligation, if we expect it to be done using technology, it's our obligation to make sure the student with a disability has that technology in the home. That's pretty clear.
Just one other comment from me, because I've seen the question in the chat a couple of times. We will provide a copy of the slides when this is over, just so everybody knows
Yes.
that.
Okay. Anything else?
All right. Well, thank you, Donna, for joining us for this Leader to Leader webinar and providing us such compassionate yet directed advice about what we should do. And I appreciated what you said around allies rarely wage war on one another. So often, out of fear, we get paralyzed. And I think we need to embrace the opportunity we have, knowing, as Jeff brought up, that many of our students don't have access at home. And for some, even if they did, they may not have the support that they need in order to do what we're expecting. So whether it's in low tech, high tech, paper and pencil, or just making face-to-face, or excuse me, virtual or phone contact, just letting kids know that we see them, we hear them, we support them, and we care about what's going on makes a huge difference in the lives of our children as well as our educators. So thank you for recognizing that. Thank you for representing both the legal end and the educational end with your background as an educator yourself.